In the summer of 2020, I found myself craving something reckless. The world had slowed to a crawl under the weight of lockdowns, and I, Madison, was suffocating in my own skin. When my roommate and longtime partner in crime, Brittany, mentioned her family was heading to Moab, Utah to celebrate her younger sister's high school graduation, I saw an opportunity. Not just for a change of scenery, but for the sort of indulgence I'd been missing since the world shut down. I convinced her to let me tag along. Brittany, with her endless optimism and eagerness to please, didn't hesitate. She was the kind of girl who made friends with bartenders and believed the world was mostly good. I was not. I was the kind of person who watched people more than I spoke, who always felt one step removed from whatever group I was standing in. I agreed to come on the trip under the guise of celebration, but in truth, I wanted something else, something thrilling, something twisted. The plan was simple: we'd drive down separately from her family and meet them there. They had an Airbnb. Brittany and I would crash on the couch for the first night, skydive with them in the morning, and spend the final night in a cabin, just the two of us, on the edge of the desert. A little independence. A little freedom. I played along like it was all an innocent adventure. Our drive down to Moab was uneventful. The desert stretched around us like some ancient secret, all red cliffs and dead silence. Brittany chatted about graduation ceremonies, old high school stories, and things that made her laugh. I smiled, nodded, and said just enough to keep her talking, all the while watching the fading sun turn the rocks to blood. That night with her family was fine. Stiff. I tolerated it for her sake. Her parents were the usual suburban blend of awkward warmth and fake enthusiasm. I held my tongue, drank what they offered, and played the part of the fun, supportive best friend. The next morning, we went skydiving. That was real. For a moment, when I was plummeting through the air with the earth racing toward me, I felt alive. Not happy, just alert. Present. Brittany screamed with joy. I didn't scream at all. The adrenaline didn't fade for hours. We hiked to a hidden watering hole Brittany had read about, where she limped along beside me with that dumb boot on her foot. She had sprained her ankle a few weeks back but still insisted on pushing through everything. I admired her recklessness even if it was born from naivety. We found the place easily enough. Crystal water glinting under the harsh sun, the rocks baking with heat. We jumped from a low ledge into the water and let the cold shock our systems. For a few minutes, it felt like the whole world had dissolved. By the time we returned to the campground, we were burnt out, muscles aching, clothes clinging to our skin, hair stiff with salt and dust. The campground sat 10 miles outside of town, a forgotten place wedged between rock and silence. The staff barely spoke when we checked in. 2 older men behind the counter of the general store gave us sour looks, like they'd seen us before in some dream they hated. The layout was simple: RVs, tents, and a row of tiny cabins barely larger than dog kennels. Ours had just enough space for 2 twin beds and a cracked wooden chair. There was no cell signal. No Wi-Fi. Just us and a patch of desert scrubland under a star-splattered sky. We cracked open a couple of Mike's Hard Lemonades and sat outside under the stars, too tired to talk. I drank more than I should have. Brittany smiled at the sky like it was a movie. I smiled at her like she was a puppet. Something about the emptiness of the place made my skin crawl, in a good way. It was pitch black when we finally stood, swaying slightly, and grabbed a lantern to make our way to the communal bathrooms. The desert was too quiet. No wind. No bugs. Just the crunch of gravel under our boots and the flicker of our weak light. Brittany stumbled a little on the uneven path, laughing. Her booted foot dragged slightly, and I had to help her keep balance. We reached the structure that held the bathrooms, a squat, concrete block with 4 individual rooms. Each one had a toilet, sink, and a shower tucked behind a faded plastic curtain. The air smelled faintly of mildew and something else, something acrid and strange. I opened the door first. The lantern cast long, strange shadows. I flipped the light switch, and everything stopped. We both froze in the doorway. There was a small, low stool in the center of the shower. 2 legs stuck out beneath the curtain. My eyes followed the vague outline rising behind the curtain, just tall enough, just still enough, to set off every ancient alarm in my brain. "What the hell?" Brittany whispered. Then I saw it, an iPhone, propped perfectly on the sink. Its screen glowed faintly, and I could see the red recording dot. That broke the spell. I slammed the door shut, grabbed Brittany by the wrist, and we bolted back through the dark. The whole time I felt like something was following us, unseen but moving in step with our panic. We barricaded ourselves inside the cabin and tried to breathe. Tried to make sense of it. But I was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Who would leave a recording phone in a bathroom? Who would stand behind a curtain and wait in silence? Who else even knew we were out there? We killed the lantern and sat in total darkness, breathing hard. I pressed my back against the wall, eyes fixed on the single tiny window in the door. The thought of someone outside watching, just inches from the glass, sent a strange excitement crawling down my spine. Brittany, though, was unraveling. Her hands shook, and I could hear her mumbling to herself, trying to rationalize what we had seen. "We're probably just being paranoid," she said after a few minutes. "It could have been a prank or something. Maybe someone was just waiting their turn for the shower. With a phone recording us?" I snapped, voice low but sharp. "In the middle of the night? In a nearly empty campground? Come on." She didn't reply. I could hear her heartbeat in the silence. It mirrored my own, thudding like a warning bell. I knew better than to ignore instincts like that. We debated whether to leave immediately. But I had been drinking more than I should have. I was not in a condition to navigate 10 miles of narrow, winding desert road in pitch black. The rocks and hairpin turns would chew us alive, and if we went off the side of a cliff, no one would find us for days. So we stayed. Against our better judgment, or maybe just against Brittany's. I felt strangely calm. The situation was dangerous, yes, but danger was a language I spoke fluently. I knew how to listen to the dark. Brittany, though, she was all nerves and softness. She pushed her bed closer to mine until the frames creaked under the strain, and then she sat down cross-legged, still clutching the pillow like it could shield her from whatever we had seen. Eventually we lay down, heads turned toward the door. Neither of us spoke. I could tell Brittany was trying to convince herself that sleep would make things better. I was not so naive. 10 minutes passed. Maybe 20. That was when Brittany whispered, "You know what's weird?" Her voice trembled, barely audible. I said nothing. I waited. She turned toward me, face ghostly in the faint moonlight leaking through the cabin window. "When I went to take a shower earlier, before we drank, I looked up and saw this light, like a little blue blinking light, in the vent above the shower." I said nothing. I just stared at her. That kind of detail could not be dismissed. A blinking light in a vent? That was not just some harmless sensor. That was a camera. Someone had rigged the vent to record. They had set it up. Someone had planned this. I wondered, briefly, how long they had been watching us. Brittany's lip quivered. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I mean, I thought maybe it was just part of the ventilation system or something. "People like to watch," I said quietly. She looked at me like I had slapped her. "What?" "People like to watch," I repeated. Especially when they think they won't get caught. Brittany stared at me for a long moment. I saw something in her eyes shift. Maybe she realized, just then, that I was not afraid in the same way she was. Or maybe she realized I had been calm this whole time. A little too calm. She did not speak again. I spent the rest of the night listening. Every creak of wood. Every crunch of gravel outside. There were no footsteps. No voices. Just the howling wind rattling against the cabin walls. I kept thinking about the camera. About the figure behind the curtain. About the phone propped on the sink, screen lit like a silent eye. I wanted to go back. I wanted to know who had been standing there. I wanted to look behind the curtain and see their face, wanted to see if they smiled when they realized they had been caught. But I stayed. I let Brittany sleep. In the morning, we packed up without speaking. We avoided the bathrooms. We avoided the staff. The two older men at the general store looked at us through narrowed eyes as we returned the cabin key, but said nothing. I drove the whole way home in silence. Brittany looked out the window the entire time. We never told anyone. Never reported what we saw. I think it was shame, mostly. Shame that we had let fear paralyze us. Shame that we had run instead of confronting it. But for me, it was something else, too. I had not been afraid. I had been curious. Curious who had been watching. Curious what they had seen. Curious why part of me had enjoyed it. Brittany and I never spoke about it again. Our friendship changed after that. She pulled away. Moved out a few months later. Said she needed to be closer to family. I understood. People like her need the illusion of safety. People like me, we thrive in the dark. Weeks passed after Moab, but the memory refused to fade. It stalked me in the quiet hours of the night when the rest of the world slept peacefully. For Brittany, that night had been a trauma, something to forget, bury, and never unearth again. For me, it was a seed. And in the silence of my apartment, that seed began to grow. I started revisiting the details obsessively. I pulled up maps of the campground online, traced our path from the cabin to the bathrooms. I imagined what would have happened if we had stayed just a little longer. What if I had pulled the curtain back? What if I had confronted whoever was behind it? The mystery gnawed at me, but so did something deeper. Something uncomfortable and unspoken. I had felt something standing in that bathroom, something real. An energy. The kind of tension you only feel when prey meets predator. And I was not the prey. Not anymore. I began researching hidden cameras. I fell down rabbit holes about surveillance devices, reading forums late into the night. I watched footage leaked from vacation rentals and public restrooms, looking at the angles, the placements. So many of them were discovered by accident. Just like us. But the more I watched, the more it stirred something inside me. It was not fear. It was control. The idea that someone had been watching us, silently, without our consent, it should have enraged me. And it did. But the part that disturbed me more was how much I understood them. I found myself thinking of that phone propped against the mirror. How careful the placement had been. The intention behind it. Not some pervert fumbling in the dark, but someone who had planned it, executed it, waited. I started walking alone at night. I told myself it was just for air, for clarity, but I always ended up near the edge of town where the lights got sparse and the shadows deepened. I would stand under broken street lamps, listening. Watching. Trying to feel the same pulse of danger I had in that bathroom. One night, I even drove back toward the desert. I told myself I was just revisiting the memory. That I would stop long before the campground. But I kept driving. The dirt roads were as winding and unforgiving as I remembered, and I had to grip the wheel tightly as the tires kicked up dust and gravel. I was sober this time, alert, deliberate. I reached the turnoff, the one that led to the general store and the row of cabins, and I stopped. The place looked abandoned. No lights. No cars. Just the outline of buildings silhouetted against the stars. I turned off the engine and sat there, letting the silence wash over me. That was when I saw it. A flicker in the far window of the general store. Just a pulse of movement. A shadow? A person? I should have turned around. But curiosity pulled me forward like a hook in my chest. I stepped out into the stillness, gravel crunching underfoot. The air was cold, dry, and completely still. My breath came out in thin clouds as I crept toward the building. The door was locked, of course. But one of the windows on the side had a crack in it, the kind caused by blunt force. I pushed on it gently, and it creaked open just enough for me to peer inside. Empty. Just shelves filled with canned goods and faded postcards. But I could sense something. A lingering presence. Like the place had not truly been empty in weeks. I walked the perimeter. Checked the doors. Nothing. Then, behind the cabins, I saw something new, something that had not been there the first time. A shed. Small. Metallic. Out of place among the worn wood and gravel paths. There was no lock on the door. Just a handle. I approached, heart thudding, not with fear, but anticipation. The inside was dark until I turned on my phone light. Cameras. Monitors. Wires snaking across the floor. There were small screens showing grainy footage of various parts of the campground. A loop of silent black and white images. Some were recent. Some old. Some, I realized with a slow, dawning horror, or maybe fascination, were of us. Me and Brittany. Sitting in the camp chairs. Walking to the bathroom. Standing in the doorway, frozen. They had been recording us. Not just that night. The whole time. I should have called the police. Reported it. But I did not. Instead, I sat in that shed for a long time, watching the monitors. Watching myself. Watching her. There was power in it. I finally understood what they must have felt. And in that moment, I did not hate them. I pitied them, for being so clumsy, for getting caught. For not being more careful. Because now, I knew how to do it better.